I'm thinking it was about a year ago that we had our last chat with Greg and Debbie and the
I
Taylors.
probably was about this time of year. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I neglected to say this at the very beginning, but I deeply appreciate, I've always deeply appreciated your work, but this is, you're a third time repeat offender on this broadcast, which
Well,
makes you the winner or the loser. I'm not sure.
well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to. I'm just happy if I'm of some use. Really.
Oh, uh, always, my friend, and just deeply appreciate you lending this crazy venture of mine a little of your time and
Well,
attention.
it's far from crazy if it reaches quite a number of people and you know and could be helpful to them. Really.
I'm at this point in my life, I'm all about the impact. The numbers will take care of themselves, but trying to do some good in this world is my primary motive. Okay, it looks like we have some folks gathering in. It's 1 minute till noon, so we are going to go ahead and get started. You are tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, from one of two places. You're either inside the Creative on Purpose website on a landing page where this broadcast is being broadcast via Zoom, or if you are a member of the Creative on Purpose Mastermind group, which is a members only group, you are able to participate by being inside the Zoom room. And in either case, when we get towards the end of our hour together, I'm going to open up the conversation to your questions. Those questions, priority for those questions will first go to the members that are here in the Zoom room with us, but that number will be small. So those of you that are watching in the website itself on the webinar landing page, feel free to use the chat to ask your questions as we go, and I'll refer back to that. If you are here, it is likely already that you know that I'm Scott Perry. I am a musician and a teacher and a husband and a father from Floyd, Virginia. I am also the founder of Creative on Purpose, the author of The Stoic Creative, and the guide at the members only mastermind group for Creative on Purpose. I'm very, very pleased to be here with a man that I consider a mentor and a friend, somebody that is my go-to authority on Marcus Aurelius and many things Stoic, Professor Chris Gill. Chris, it is my habit to not introduce my guests, but to allow them to introduce themselves. That way I don't miss anything really important. But if you don't mind, please tell folks where you are, who you are, and what you're working on these days.
Okay, well, I'm in Exeter in Britain, in the southwest of Britain, where the weather is balmy and delightful. I'm a retired member of the classics department at the University of Exeter, and I'm working. I do a lot of my work is on Stoicism. This is the main focus of my academic work, and I'm currently writing a book on Stoic ethics, trying to give my own picture of Stoic ethics and what's important about it, and how it can contribute to modern philosophy about ethics, about morality, about how we should live. So that's what I'm up to.
And just because I think it will be of interest to those, especially those that already have an interest and do consider themselves students of Stoicism, you're also one of the people that founded and continues to work with the Stoic Week. Can you share a little bit about your work there and maybe if you recall the dates when that's going to happen?
Happy to do that. Yes, for a number of years now, we've put together a Live Like a Stoic Week, which happens every autumn. This is just from memory, but I think we're starting on September the 29th and running for a week. So that'll be to something like October the 6th. And that gives people a chance to explore an online course, which gives a kind of guided introduction to key Stoic principles and helps and provides exercise, meditation, and so on to help people embed these in their lives for a week as a taster. So that's coming up, and I'm working on with others on refining the handbook. We have a look at it every year and make some changes, refresh it. And there's also, at the same time, a Stoicon, as an event, a public event, where people talk about what's involved in putting Stoicism into practice this year in London. Again, it's on Saturday, September the 29th. So that's what I'm doing. There's also an ongoing blog, Stoicism Today. And the easiest place to find any information about this movement is a website called Modern Stoicism, home of Stoic Week and Stoicon. There's another Modern Stoicism site, but it's that one, Modern Stoicism. And if you click there on the blog on Stoicism Today, and you look at the blog archive, you'll find there are a number of items by me or contributions that I've made over the years, if anyone wants to follow up my sort of visual, or whatever the word is, presence. Apart from books and things that I write. What's the word? Web presence, I think.
There you go. Well, okay. So yes, Chris is a veritable online hermit. So if you want to connect with him, and I recommend you do.
Yes.
You can do it there at the Modern Stoicism site. There are a number. In fact, the reason why I'm connecting with Chris today is because the person that curates that blog, Greg Sadler, invited me to write a piece on Stoicism and creativity. And I've actually initially got together with Chris to ask for his help and wise counsel as I'm putting that piece together. So Chris, because there is a significant portion of this audience that definitely considers themselves as students of Stoicism or have a strong interest in Stoicism. There are others that more closely align themselves as simply being creatives that may or may not have any knowledge or interest in Stoicism, but we're here to talk about where the two ideas intersect. So for those that may not have a complete or correct understanding of Stoicism, can you give us just a thumbnail sketch, 3 sentences or so about how you would define or describe Stoic philosophy?
Okay, well, just to be clear, Stoic philosophy was practiced widely in ancient Greece and Rome between the 3rd century BCE and the 2nd century CE, and it was one of the most important ancient philosophies. It consisted of 3 branches: ethics, physics, and logic. But the focus of my book and the focus for applied Stoicism is mainly ethics. And there are perhaps 3 features that are very important, central to Stoic ethics. One is the idea that our happiness doesn't depend on external things. It doesn't depend on becoming wealthy or acquiring an important political position or becoming CEO of your organization. It depends on developing the virtues, the qualities that matter, that are central to leading a good human life. And those are things that are up to us. They're things that we can do something about as agents to develop in ourselves. So that's one idea, that our happiness in that sense depends on us. And happiness is a matter of leading a good human life. Another related idea is that the ability to develop virtue and happiness is something we all have. All human beings as such have this capacity. You don't have to be special in terms of your innate qualities. You don't have to have a special social background. You don't even have to have a particular kinds of elaborate education. You have to just be a human being and express qualities that are fundamental to being human. And going along with that, a third feature is the idea that all human beings in that sense form part of a kind of brotherhood or family or citizenship. We're all part of that cosmic humanity that is inbuilt in nature, whether we are Americans or British or Syrian or whatever, wherever we're from. And and in that sense, there's a fundamental bond between us all. So those are just 3 very important features, I think, that are worth, that we can find valuable today in Stoicism.
Very well said. I think it's important to remember that Stoicism is an ancient Hellenistic philosophy. But it's also one of the most enduring. And people still may study Epicureanism or cynicism or skepticism or some of the others as intellectual pursuits, but they're not as widely practiced as Stoicism. And I think of all of those ancient philosophies, philosophy used to be something that wasn't necessarily reserved for the hallowed halls of academia, but it was something that everyday people pursued in their everyday lives, sometimes on stoas in conversation with teachers, but sometimes in conversation just amongst themselves. And they're really just trying to answer some basic questions like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be happy? How can I be more of both? And Stoicism is one that endures, I think, the strongest. It certainly seems to be undergoing a revival, thanks in large part to your work with Stoic Week and the work of a lot of other folks in the modern Stoicism movement. And so the things that I think, I'll just share this and then I'll ask for your opinion. It seems that the Stoics got two things right that they didn't have the scientific or empirical ability to prove, but they ended up being proven. And the Stoics said that the two defining human characteristics are our capacity for reason and our social nature. And it turns out that those two things together helped us develop to the point where not only were we able to survive, but we were able to thrive as a species and eventually really dominate the planet. But those two core elements are really important, along with the virtues that you discussed. Any thoughts on that? And maybe if you would also share the 4 Stoic virtues.
Yes, no, I agree very much with that. And in fact, the Stoics in our sources, our ancient sources, human beings are often defined exactly in those terms as rational and sociable. They thought that animals were in some sense sociable, and they thought that is all animals, non-human animals. And they thought the clearest mark of animal sociability is the care that many species exercise for their young. The parental, maternal and parental love, they thought was basic, and that was a proof of sociability. Yeah, so rational and social, these are the core features, and I think they're right. I don't think that idea has not gone out of date. It's as you say, it's better. It's one we can support today. The virtues, the virtues are a kind of developed version of those basic qualities. So the virtues are the way in which they defined the virtues as forms of knowledge or expertise. So if we know how to live well in different areas, we are expressing the virtues. That's what the virtues are. They are developed forms of understanding. And yeah, they tend to define, well, sometimes the virtues are defined as aspects of knowledge or wisdom, but at other times they talk in terms of the 4 cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control or moderation. So wisdom is the intellectual or rational understanding that enables us to live well. Courage is what enables us to endure danger and difficulty using our rationality and sociability. Justice is treating people appropriately and giving people what is due to them. And moderation is a combination of managing our emotions and also managing our relations with other people in a way that respects them. So those are the 4 cardinal virtues, and they saw them as I say, developed versions of some basic instincts or motives. So I hope that's...
Oh yeah, that's very helpful. And so just one last thing about Stoicism before we move on to creativity.
Yeah.
What we have had a few conversations before this, and one of the things that I recall you sharing is that Stoicism and you will put it much more correctly and articulately than I'm going to remember, but it's very much a philosophy about finding and cultivating one's potentiality and one's purpose, and to apply oneself purposefully to the art of living and to the act of being in the world and being a social creature, but also being a person in the world doing work.
Yes. No, I think that's a very good way of putting it. And I think that leads us nicely into creativity.
Exactly.
What would a Stoic say about creativity? How does Stoics? Well, I think the first thing is to say is that it isn't obvious that that's a term they would use. On the other hand, I think it is clear if you explained what we mean by creativity. I think it's clear what kind of answer they would give. And I think they would locate creativity in terms of what they saw as the basic fundamental motives that are part of being human. And they link that very much with their idea of that there's a kind of natural pattern of development in human life, which they call in Greek oikoiosis, in English appropriation. It's the way in which we appropriate our own nature and we appropriate other people. And they think that those are natural ways to behave. They're ways in which we will behave if we fulfill our human nature. So appropriation for them consists of two strands. There's a strand which we have an inbuilt desire and instinct to develop and complete our own nature in the fullest possible way. And we also have a natural desire to care for others of our kind, our children and our friends and our family, and also eventually, if you carry this to its completion, all human beings or any given human being. So creativity then is a matter of expressing these fundamental human capacities and motives, but doing so in a complete and profound way. And that's where the virtues come in again, because the virtues are the way in which we can shape these motives and give them expertise, knowledge, completeness. So for them, for the Stoics, the more expertly we live as human beings, the more we will realize these fundamental motives, the more we will achieve happiness, and that is how we will be creative. So that applies, and importantly, this is something, as I mentioned before, we can all do. These capacities they're not just for an elite, they're not just for an intellectual elite, they're not just for a social elite, they're something that all human beings can do. And the more fully we express these fundamental human motives, the more, in our terms, creative we will be. So I think that's where they would locate creativity. So creativity is a matter of allowing this fundamental human motivation to express itself most fully, and crafting it with knowledge and understanding, and with a kind of intensity of care. I think that's how they would see creativity.
That's very, very well said, and beautifully put. In the Stoic creative, I define creativity simply. It's a basic human impulse that we all possess and we all employ in our day-to-day lives, and that it's simply the act of bringing something into the world that didn't yet exist. So every time you make a meal or send a message or make a mess or make amends, you're engaged in you're engaging your creative impulse, and that creative acts rise to art or artistry when they are done with a proper motivation, a specific intention, and with some type of aspiration that is intended to enhance the lives of others. Art is something that happens in public. Creativity, so therefore, all art is an act of creativity, but not all creativity is necessarily artistic. We can, until we employ it stand up and be seen and speak up and be heard. The creativity is just creativity, but and this is why I'm so deeply interested in connecting these two, because Stoicism encourages us to excel, to develop our potential, to be purposeful in all that we do, to be of service to our fellow human beings, to be teachers, to endure when we cannot agree. These are things, those are all lessons that have so much value to people engaged in creative and artistic pursuits, because what we broadly now think of as creative enterprise, whether it's graphic design or software coding or the fine arts or music, writing, what have you, all of those pursuits are fraught with challenges and obstacles and frustration. And because Stoicism is a philosophy that provides us with the principles and practices to thrive through any situation or circumstances, it therefore seems that there's much to inform and contribute to a thriving journey as a creative or an artist. You touched already on a few themes that I'd like to have you unpack a little bit further. One is, you mentioned craft, the idea of practicing. And so if you want to start there, the other thing that leaps to mind is this idea of approaching things with a sense of curiosity and wonder, because that allows us to be present, to be in the here and now, and seems a way of helping us not suffer so much as we often do when we are too focused on the results that we seek in the future, or whatever things that we are overcoming in our past.
Yes, I think that craft, the word they use is techne, which means a craft, expertise, and the idea that there's an art of living is one that they're very, very fond of. Marcus Aurelius, who was a Stoic, well, he was an emperor, but also wrote a beautiful work called the Meditations, and he just calls it the art, and he means the art of living, and he's always urging himself to try and develop this craft to live properly, and for them, the exercising the craft is all bound up with the things I mentioned before, with the virtue, with exercising the virtues, with trying to develop the virtues, fulfill the virtues, and with doing so in every area of your life, and also perhaps I'll come back to the matter of living in the present, but I wonder if I could mention just one other Stoic idea, because you might say, well, of course, it's all very well, all these ideas about, creativity in general, but how do we locate ourselves? We can't all be creative in all areas. There must be certain areas where we have to find our project, our area. Now, the Stoics have a very interesting framework for doing this, which is what they call the theory of the four roles, or the theory of the four personae. It's not in Marcus, but it's in Cicero, in the On Duties, but it is a Stoic idea. The Stoics think that all of us can think about our lives in terms of four roles that we all play, and that we must try and bring together these four roles. One role is that of a human being, to be human in ways that we've talked about already. Another role is our role as individuals, that each of us have certain characteristics, certain abilities, certain inclinations, and so each of us will be human in our own particular way, and will express the virtues in the way that we are best placed to do it. You'll be a guitarist, and I'll be a classicist, and all the other different variations that we all have. And there are two other aspects, which are two other roles they thought were important. One is the social context we find ourselves in. Of course, in the ancient world, you had a lot less choice about what that context was. But even in the modern world, we all find ourselves somewhere, and we are, the brother of this person, the child of that, and so on. And the fourth role then is the project that the role that you choose for yourself, if you can choose for yourself. And their idea then is that you harmonize all these roles to each other. That if you want to give your life unity and coherence and equanimity, you have to harmonize these to each other. But above all, you have to harmonize yourself to the first role, which is our role as human beings, as people who are capable of exercising the virtues. So the idea then is that, okay, so you want to be creative and you want to practice your craft, well, and you want to find out what your craft is, you use this idea of the four roles, the four personae, to kind of help choose your path through life and find your way, the way that's possible and best for you to exercise your creativity, these fundamental motives. And that having done that, you persist, you carry through that role, that project, through all the difficulties that we all experience, and carry them through to the end. And Marcus especially stresses this, that, okay, we're all going to die, but it doesn't mean that that makes our life absurd or meaningless. Far from it. We can carry our role through to the end. Indeed, the way we die can be part of that process. And because we live as part of an extended world, our lives touch other people, and we are touched by their lives. So they give us not just a kind of a very broad and valuable conception of what creativity is, but also a kind of framework that we can help to find the way in which we can be most creative, I think.
That's brilliant. So the four rules come from the writing of Cicero.
Yes, Cicero gets them from an earlier Stoic called Panaitius, but they have their kind of equivalent in other Stoic ideas, and they figure in Epictetus too, uses similar ideas. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, and you touched on this earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is my favorite Marcus quote, because it's the one that I probably quote the most often, and that has provided, inspiration and solace throughout my career as a performing musician. And the quote is, "Love the humble art that you have learned and take rest in it." And he's speaking there, I think, to what you were just saying. By art, he means the art of living well, the art of being a human being.
Yes, absolutely. That is what he means. Let me read you another passage.
Of course.
Which I think, and this also will lead us on to the now, I think. At every hour, give your full concentration as a Roman and a man. He means a man because he is a man. He's talking to him, by the way, to carrying out the task in hand with a scrupulous and unaffected dignity and affectionate concern for others and freedom and justice, and give yourself space from all other concerns. You will give yourself this if you carry out each act as if it were the last of your life, freed from all randomness and passionate deviation from the rule of reason, and from pretense and self-love and dissatisfaction with what has been allotted to you. You will see how few things you need to master to be able to live a smoothly flowing and God-fearing life. The gods will ask no more from one who maintains these principles. Well, there's a lot in that passage, of course, but some of the ideas it contains is that you focus completely on your task, on your project, on what matters for you, what is the vehicle of your creativity and your task. And of course, you do so in his case as a Roman, as a man, it might be as an American, as a woman, or whatever. And you give yourself space. You give yourself space, and you give yourself space by seeing the importance of what you're doing, but also giving it a context and as he puts it, carrying out each act as if it were the last of your life. So you set everything else aside. So there is, if you like, no future and no past. Of course, there are those things, but you act as if you're in a kind of now, and that is what mattered. And you set aside randomness, deviation, irrelevance. And if you do that, he says, you will live a smoothly flowing life. And by that he means a happy life, a life that is, because the smooth flow of life is one of their definitions of happy, because you will be expressing in the fullest possible way what it means to be human, what it means to express the virtues. So I think that's that's Meditations 2.5, and it's a very, very beautiful expression, I think, of this idea of the craft, the art, and what that means.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out here that I think that one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to Marcus in particular, although I've read all of the Stoic, the major Stoic texts that are available, and I've dived into the fragments of Musonius Rufus and the works of Cicero as well, but it's the way that Marcus has a way with metaphor and the way that he states things that is in itself artistic and crafted and beautiful, and it's therefore perhaps the most accessible to writers in particular. But also, I was introduced to it as a very young man, as a seventh grader. I guess I was 13 or 14 is when I first read Meditations. And what struck me was that here was a man from antiquity that was speaking to himself in a way that was very similar to the way that a 14-year-old middle-class kid in suburbia was speaking to himself as he navigated the trials and tribulations, of life. And one of the things you just brought up this idea of presence in, and that's, I think, crucial for not only being focused on doing our work for the right reasons and in alignment with our values and virtue. It's also important for our happiness, because if we are in the present and we remain curious and courageous about putting our effort into our work, then we are not bothered by the extraneous things as to whether, fame, fortune, criticism, what have you. But there's also an element in that passage near and dear to my heart as the founder of Creative on Purpose about being purposeful. And there's a quote that I pulled out called, and I will not be able to cite the book and passage, but the quote, Chris, is: first, do nothing inconsiderate or without a purpose. Mm-hmm. Second, make your acts refer to nothing but a social end. And that's another profound and powerful passage that has really helped me in the work that I do as a musician and as a teacher and as a writer.
I think there's, and again, but those passages reflect what I pointed out, where they thought these primary human motives, that we all have the desire to realize our own nature as human beings, to realize through the virtues, and at the same time to care for others. And I think what's another valuable thing about Stoicism is that they don't see these as alternative. They don't talk about egoism versus altruism, about looking after yourself or looking after others. These are both parts of the craft of living, the art of living. The caring for yourself and caring for your nature and caring for others, these go hand in hand. And of course, there are complications in that, but fundamentally, these aren't opposed. And I think in our society, we find it difficult sometimes to see that, to recognize that it's when we practice our own art most profoundly, most purposefully, we're also doing what we can, perhaps uniquely, for other people, and those things can hang together.
I think it's almost a requirement that I mean, you cannot see, hear, and understand people as a empathetic, compassionate human being if you're not able to first do that for yourself. And so taking care of your primary asset, which is your own well-being, mental, spiritual, and physical health, is something that has to be a part of it. And I love what you said, that we don't have to, that the development of ourselves doesn't mean never puts us at odds with other people's ability to develop themselves and to pursue their excellence. We can pursue our excellence not at the expense of others, but alongside other people. And our work, and I'm using that in the broadest sense, whether it's our work as artists or our work as human beings or our work as parents and peers and friends and so forth, should align all those things. That everything is possible simultaneous. We can be ourselves. We can't allow others to be themselves. We can enhance our lives while we're enhancing the lives of others through the work that we do with and for others, which also brings in this idea of collaboration and maybe cosmopolitanism.
Yes, because in finding what's most fundamental to our own humanity, and in recognizing that humanity is shared, is common, that's where we're recognizing that the world forms a kind of a co-citizenship, because we recognize that all other human beings have these same capacities that we are trying to recognize, that it isn't that people are fundamentally different, even if they're from a foreign country, that they too have the ability to express their human nature and those qualities that we value, those very same qualities. And that's where the cosmopolitanism lies. And also, yes, I mean, Marcus, again, he doesn't see cosmopolitanism and being a Roman as alternatives. Here's another passage. Yes, here we are. He says, as Antoninus, that was his family name, my city and fatherland is Rome. As a human being, it is the universe. It is only what benefits these cities, which is good for me. So he was Antoninus. He was the emperor. He was, that was his role. That was his craft, if you like, or part of his craft. And he was a Roman, and what he did was to benefit Rome, and he did indeed benefit Rome in many ways. But as a human being, he could rise above that. He could see that beyond that, he was also a human being and a citizen of the universe. And I think it's very important to try and bring those two things together. Even as you try to be a patriotic American or British or whatever else, a Frenchman or whatever it might be, or Syrian again, that you also see yourself as part of the universe and part of the fellowship of humankind. Could I just read one other passage?
Of course.
It's a wonderful passage, and it does bring in something that you touched on earlier. Marcus says, I travel along nature's way until I fall down and take my rest, breathing out my last into the air, from which I draw my daily breath, and falling down to that earth from which my father drew his seed, my mother her blood, and my nurse her milk, and from which, for so many years, I've taken my daily food and drink, the earth, which carries my footsteps, and which I've used to the full in so many ways. I travel along nature's way until I fall down. So he's not only part of humanity, he's not only cosmopolitanism, he's part of nature. He's embedded in nature, the air, the earth, the milk. These things are you're being a human being. You have your father, your mother, your nurse, and you also have the earth, and you're part of the earth and part of nature. And that's something that really speaks to us now, because we've become terribly detached from nature, and we've done terrible things to nature, and yet we have to learn again to recognize our presence as nature, within nature, and our mortality, but our mortality which doesn't disqualify or invalidate all that we are. It gives us a context. So I think the acceptance that going along with our agency and our intensity and purpose is also a willingness to accept the limits
Oh.
of our.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that is the very next point I wanted to bring up. But just to kind of wrap up what you were just saying,
Yes.
this is another thing that Marcus does, I think, better than others whose work we have access to, and that is the idea of contextualizing. Contextualizing himself, contextualizing his position, contextualizing where he lives, Rome, and being able to always pull back and see himself and his work and his place in the broader context of humanity and the cosmos itself. And it just, again, so helpful for the artist or the creative who spends so much of their time living in their head and cycling and living in cycles that seem never ending and can result in a lot of tail chasing and unhappiness, because we're concerned about things that in the grand scheme of things don't really matter. So just as you were just before you started talking about acceptance, I wrote down acceptance because I wanted to wrap up on this point, because I've been thinking deeply about this recently, because it's something that I champion with my students and with my friends who are musicians and artists. This idea that acceptance on multiple levels. Acceptance first, that the work is not about you, that the work doesn't come from you, it comes through you, and that the results of your work, the results of your effort, and not that it's not important to set goals and to strive for results, but those are so largely outside of your control. It's best to let them take care of themselves and to willingly accept whichever result happens. Either you get the fame and the fortune that maybe you're chasing, or you don't. You write the piece. The piece comes out as beautifully formed as you imagined it, or not. But that the problem sometimes that people have with this idea of providence and accepting what fate bestows upon us is that they think it means that we are being either passive or lazy. And I would argue that we are being neither. But because I think you could speak to this much more articulately than I'm going to turn that point over to you.
Well, that's right. Often people think the Stoics are fatalists. So all you need to do is just accept that everything's going to happen, and there you are. And this is what the Stoics used to call the lazy argument. Because you just leave everything to fate. And this isn't, of course, at all what they meant. For one thing, they weren't actually fatalists. They were what's sometimes called philosophically compatibilists. They thought that our agency, our capacity for action and decision and responsibility are compatible with recognizing that we're also part of a larger web of events, and that we are ourselves part of fate. We're a quite different part of fate from, say, a book or a glass, which is in a way passive, but we are not passive. We make decisions, and what happens in life is the result of the totality of all the decisions that are made, including our decisions. So we are a special kind of dimension of fate, a special kind of cause, was how they put it. So that's one thing. But the other thing I think they want to say is this, that it's very important for us to do everything in our power, to lead a good life, a humane life, a virtuous life. But also going with that is an acceptance of certain limitations, which are just part of our existence, part of our mortality. And of course, the most difficult thing to accept is our death, because we live, as it were, we tend to live with always the future in mind, and with the projects we want to complete and to effect. And death seems to mark a kind of breaking and rupture of that. And so one aspect of if you like fate that they address very fully is that we must live. We should live fully, and but we should live knowing that the life will come to an end. And I wonder if I could just read one more passage of Marcus.
Absolutely.
He does address this, and he's talking to himself again. But he says this: "My friend, you have been citizen of this great city of the universe. What difference if you live in it for 5 years or 100? For what is laid down in its laws is equitable for all. Where is the hardship then? If it is no tyrant or unjust judge that sends you out of the city, but nature who brought you into it. It's just as if the director of a show, after first engaging an actor, were dismissing him from the stage. But I haven't played all 5 acts, only 3. Very well, but in life, 3 can make up a full play. For the one who determines when it is complete is he who arranged for your composition and now arranges for your dissolution, while you, for your part, are responsible for neither. So make your departure with a good grace, as he who is releasing shows a good grace." So we're part of nature, we're part of the world, we're part of a causal web. Within that, we play our part. We play the 4 roles, as I mentioned earlier. We live out these fundamental human qualities. We exercise our creativity in every possible way, if we can. But we have to accept that at some point, the act will come to an end, the play will come to an end. But it won't, in a way, we can continue to act, to play our part, to complete our play up until the moment of death, in the moment of death. And in a way, of course, the play goes on. So I think they face very frontally, this fundamental anxiety that affects it all, and shows that it needn't be a negative, it can be a positive and be part of the smooth flow of life, and that our creativity can be fully expressed within the life we have.
Absolutely. That's beautifully stated. I'll say one thing about that in just a second, but I wanted to just quickly go one step back to the acceptance idea, because, and I'm familiar with the lazy argument, and you touched on this in what you were saying, that, the results of our work, the results of our effort are what they are, and they are what providentially was determined, and so forth. But that's not an ultimate end necessarily, unless things have gone horribly wrong, I guess. But whatever result we get, we then get to decide what we do next. Now, yes, that may also, fate may have something in store for what happens further down the road, but it's not so much about, at that point, it's not about where you arrive, but with your work or with your project or with your expectation, but then what you then decide to do. And if you continue to apply yourself purposefully with the common good in mind, and with intention, and to use the opportunity to take the learning from whatever result you received, it continues on. And just to kind of tie this into what you were just saying about mortality, you alluded to this, the dance doesn't end just because our bodies have been put in the earth. We still have a role. We are nurturing, putting nutrients back into the earth, and there will be more life. I go for a run every day at the local cemetery. I used to run in town, but I came close to being hit so many times, I decided that if I didn't want to end up in the cemetery, I should go run at the cemetery. And it is my daily meditation. I either walk or run, or some combination thereof, 3 or 4 miles. And I'm reminded of the ultimate end for me. And I find nothing there's nothing depressing about that for me in that moment. But I'm here. I have this time now. And now that I have restored my body and cleared my mind, I can now go back home and do work that's worth doing and connect with people who enhance my life while I am at the same time trying to enhance theirs. There's a story I like to tell back when we raised our boys on a farm just up the road that we sold when the boys grew up and left. And we've since moved to town, but it had 100-year-old apple tree on it, over 100-year-old tree. Mm-hmm. And this one year, it put forth the most amazing display of flowering and then subsequently fruit. It had never put forth that much fruit before. When the bees were pollinating, the tree literally vibrated with the activity that was going on. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we made use of the fruit. And the next year, the tree went into a steep decline and was clearly dying. So we brought an agricultural agent out to take a look. And he described it as the tree's final flourish, that the tree knew that the end was coming and therefore did everything in its power to put forth as much goodness as it could before it returned to the earth. And so that'll be my last word on that. It's you can do good and you can be of service and you can do work worth doing up until the very end. If an apple tree can do it, then I think we all can make an effort.
Well, that's what Marcus was saying. Live every day as if it's your last.
Right.
So agency, expressing our creativity and energy and purpose, and acceptance, they can go hand in hand. They needn't be an alternative. So it's not the lazy argument; it's the active argument that you can combine those things, and it's a very fact of your recognition of your mortality that can help to give focus and purpose, because you're not endlessly putting stuff on. Don't act as if you had 1,000 years, Marcus says. The inevitable hangs over you, but that it shouldn't sort of prevent you doing things, rather the reverse. Yeah. Live all you can.
It's much, I find it empowering. And those passages from Marcus to me are not a call to despair, but a call to action. And you've mentioned agency several times now, and I think it's a great point to sort of end on, because what all the Stoics say over and over again is you have a choice. You can choose how you decide to see things, how you frame them, how you perceive them, and you get to choose what you do next. Mm-hmm. And even though they then go on to tell you all the things that are beyond your control, the fact that you control those two things gives you all the power that you really need.
Yes, and all the power that we can have and all the power you need to live a good life.
Brilliant. So we have a few of the members of the Creative on Purpose Mastermind here inside the Zoom room, and I'm going to invite Andrew and Michael if they would like to raise their hand and ask a question, or if you prefer, you can type it in the chat box. And then, for reasons I'm not sure of, the chat in the site is quiet, and I'm hoping that, of course, if there's been a technical glitch, everybody will watch it in replay. But I'm just going to type a quick note here to see if anybody is here. Excuse me for that. Now, I also want to say, before I choose bringing Andrew into the conversation, during the course of this conversation, if you heard cats wailing and banging around, that was
was it?
Yes, those were my two misbehaving.
That's fine. That's fine. I was just wondering.
Yes, it sounded like something was going on that wasn't going on. It was actually two cats.
My house, so I'm rather relieved since I don't have
So, well, my two cats were misbehaving, and then I was texting my son to rescue me from further embarrassment. So I'm going to go ahead and click on,
expressing the brotherhood of cats.
yes, my cats are not at all stoic. So I'm gonna promote Andrew here so that he can ask his question.
Yeah.
And he should be entering. And he also appears to have put something in the chat.
Okay.
Hey, Andrew. Let's see. Let's get you unmuted here. Okay, we should be able to hear you.
I just need 2 minutes to go and find a quieter spot. So.
Okay, very good. So Andrew is, I think, a fellow countryman, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I think he sounded like one, as far as I can tell there.
I feel vastly outnumbered here. While we're waiting for Andrew to get himself a quiet spot, again, I want to express my gratitude to you, Chris. This is every conversation with you has been amongst my favorites, and I've had over 50 of these kind of conversations with various authorities in creativity and stoicism. But your insights are always brilliant, and the quiet profoundness of what you shared here today is greatly appreciated. I know people are going to get a lot of value out of this discussion.
Well, it's been just lovely talking to you, Scott, and sharing, obviously, because these things obviously matter to you very much too, and you've thought about them, and so it's wonderful to have that contact.
No, likewise, my friend. Okay, so Andrew, you have a question.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, as I said, first of all, I'm at work and I have had people bothering me, and I wasn't able to do much about it, so I was dipping in and out. But I was just thinking about what you said about Christopher, about the connectedness, and I have some friends who are quite into meditation and spirituality, and they have this concept of the universe, and I look at that from a kind of scientific perspective. But is there a kind of Stoic position on that in terms of this connectedness, and how some people have the notion of God? I'm not a particularly religious person, but the way things happen and the universe connects us in some way. I'm quite interested, and it's a metaphor that I haven't really developed, and I'm wondering if there's anything in Stoicism that can help with that, to kind of give some context of how we're connected, and if there is any kind of motivation behind the way things happen, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, the Stoics have ideas about that. They think that the universe, in a way, well, if you like, that it's a kind of embodied form of life, and they single out two characteristics that they think are features of the universe, taken as a whole. One feature is rationality, but by that they mean that the universe is ordered, structured, and whole, which they take as signifying rationality. So they think the universe as a whole is ordered, structure, and rational. And they also think that the universe exercises providential care for everything within the universe. So the universe cares for all the forms of life. It enables all the forms of life that exist within it: humans, animals, plants, sea, air, and so on. Now, from our point of view, we would perhaps see these as metaphorical ideas, but they are, so these are fundamental characteristics of the universe as a whole. And they also think that they're features that we, human beings, can aspire to, that we too can aspire to be rational in the sense of being structured, ordered, and achieving a kind of wholeness as in our character, personality, our lives. And we too can exercise a kind of providential care, both for ourselves and for other people, potentially all other people. So they think that part of being alive, being a human being, is being part of the universe and kind of understanding your own place within the universe. But this doesn't just mean just kind of accepting, that everything's kind of given or determined in the sense that you have no role. Your role is to kind of is to fulfill within yourself, within your life, the best qualities of the universe if you can. Is that making any sense?
It does. I guess where my brain starts to hurt a little is kind of, I can take it from, the creation of matter and then kind of mitochondria, and we've evolved from that. And now we've evolved to a state where we have, certain kind of physical characteristics, and we have this thing in our head that gives us perception as well. I guess where what's the challenge for me is to when you kind of move from the physical side of things, which is a continuation of,
Sure.
We were created out of matter, to some kind of abstraction that's separate from that. If that,
yeah. I suppose they tend to go for the kind of, if you like, high level characteristics, the abstract characteristics. But of course, yes, the universe is matter, but it is matter of a certain kind. And we too are matter of a certain kind. Mm-hmm. And I think these are the features I've been talking about, are the features that they think are most important when you stand back, as it were, from the universe as a material entity and try and sum up what is most valuable and important in it. By the way, they are materialists, the Stoics. They think we are matter and we are forms of life and the universe is matter. So they don't think that they aren't like Plato, who thought that there's a big difference between ideas and matter. So I think it's a matter of generalization, of abstraction. And, there are some scientists today, I mean, including Stephen Hawking, who, talk about, they go for the big picture. They go for, and so what I've been giving you in Stoicism is, if you like, the big picture, but it's a big picture about a material entity that has it, that you could break down in terms of, what atoms or whatever you like.
So who are there any particular writers who focus on this more than others? Well, if I was going to go read
the universe, well, there's a book. There's Cicero on the Nature of the Gods, book 2. Cicero wrote a book called On the Nature of the Gods, and in book 1 he discusses Epicurean ideas about the universe, and in book 2 and 3 he discusses the Stoic ideas of the universe. And it's in, there's a World's Classics or a Penguin Classics. So I would think that's the best place to start. And he lays out the arguments for and against it. And by the way, they didn't, lots of people in the ancient world didn't agree about it. They have big arguments about this. And so, but I think it's a good window to that.
I'll just jump in with one thought here, Andrew. The question that you're asking is probably no place for somebody just getting started with Stoicism to start. These ideas are amongst the ones most difficult to articulate and wrestle with, but they are amongst the most profound. They certainly have helped me a great deal with finding my place in the universe and grappling with my own sense of, what is the divine, what is providence, what is, is there a God, or is there not? Cicero's work that Chris alluded to is, Cicero has lots of great things to say, and he is not himself a Stoic, but he is a lover of the Stoics and a very articulate writer. I'm going to go ahead and change your role. And
Okay, thank you, Chris.
thank you so much,
Yeah.
Andrew, for jumping in. So it looks like, I'm not quite sure why, Chris, but we don't have any questions coming in from the website, and we have reached the end of our hour together. So again, all I can say is every minute I spend in conversation with you is a minute well spent, and I have learned much, and my life has been enhanced greatly by our conversation. I really appreciate all the great work you do, but the time and attention that you provide my endeavors is always very, very deeply appreciated.
And a pleasure for me too, and a joy. Thank you.
I hope we get to do it again soon. I'm going to go ahead and just hold on, if you would, for 1